Hi guys, welcome back to another Edison Rulings 10 Things That You Should Know. This is going to be part 3 of the series, so just stay tuned for the rest. So this is going to be 10 of them. So let's start us off. The first one's going to be Dark End Dragon. So player A summons Dark End Dragon with set bottomless trap hole, and player A wants to call priority to make it lose 500 attack and send this card to the graveyard. The question is, does the card still send to the graveyard even if bottomless was activated? And the answer to this is no. So Dark End Dragon has to officially lose 500 attack in order to resolve its effect. If it cannot lose 500 attacks because of Bottomless Trap Hole or Book of Moon even, it won't be able to resolve its effect and send the monster to the graveyard. So yeah, so that will be rulings number 1. On to the next one. So this one's going to be a little bit more interesting. So here we have Phantom of Chaos, and Phantom of Chaos is going to activate its effect to banish the Sky Scourge Norleras that was sent to the graveyard, and it copies its effect. Sky Scourge Norleras reads, if you can pay 1,000 life points to send all cards on the field in both players' hands to the graveyard, then you draw 1 card. So this one's interesting because it says then you draw 1 card. This was actually a mistranslation according to some of the sources. Sky Scourge Norleras actually draws a card simultaneously with destroying or sending all cards to the hand of the field. So you might use the case of Soul Taker versus Elemental Hero Shining, where if Elemental Hero Shining is destroyed by Soul Taker, it would make the Elemental Hero Shining miss timing. However, Soul Taker was translated properly, whereas Sky Scourge Norleras was not. So in this case, sending a Dupe Frog to the graveyard, because Dupe Frog is like the most commonly missed timing card in Edison format. If you send all cards to the field simultaneously and drawing a card simultaneously, the last thing that does happen is Dupe Frog being sent to the graveyard. So this is going to be rulings number 2. So in this case, Dupe Frog will be able to search a frog monster from the graveyard or the deck. Yeah, it's weird because in this specific scenario, only in this scenario will you see a card that says then you can draw 1 card be occurred as simultaneously, which is not. Mostly for most cards like Soul Taker. On to the next one. Now that we are on the topic of missing timing, we have another scenario here where we have a Dandelion in the graveyard. Player A summons Debris Dragon, targeting the Dandelion, and then designs the chain links to be where, well, you can't design a chain link to be a certain way. Black Rose Dragon has to be chain link 2, where Dandelion does have to be chain link 1. So, if this resolves, Black Rose Dragon does destroy all the cards on the field as chain link 2, and then destroying the Dupe Frog. However, the last thing that does happen is the resolution or the resolvation of Dandelion. So in that case, the last thing that happens is getting the Dandelion token, not the destruction of Dupe Frog, thus making Dupe Frog miss timing. So this can occur in the matchups where Quick Draw Danny Warrior is against the Frog matchup, and Black Rose Dragon destroying the Dupe block if there's 2 Dupe Frog or whatever. This would make it miss timing. Yep, so on to the next one. Okay, so this is something that came up in my head when I was watching Fish of Decay happen in the last previous tournament. Here we have well, it didn't really happen in the tournament, but it occurred to me in theory. So player A decides to activate Cold Wave, and Cold Wave has a word where you have to activate in main phase 1, but that's irrelevant to this conversation. The relevant part is until your next turn, you and your opponent cannot play or set any spell or trap cards. So in this case, that resolves. If you summon out the fish and then you bring out your typical combo where you have Armory Arm and Colossal Fighter. So you have Armory Armor here, and you have made Colossal Fighter using Fishborg Blaster and Qualicanth. And you equip the Armory Arm to the Caius. This is actually not an OTK. The reason why this is not an OTK is because Armory Arm's effect is actually negated by Cold Wave. So if anybody still uses Cold Wave in Fish OTK, be wary of the fact that Armory Arm does not activate its effect as an effect to burn under Cold Wave. So if you see someone doing this, it's actually an illegal thing that you can't do. Yeah, so just be careful of that one. On to the next one. Okay, so here's another one. A lot of Absolute Zero decks, including Diva Heroes, Zombies, or Diva Hero, whatever you want to call it, was around, so it made me think of this scenario. So here we have Absolute Zero declare an attack on a set Ryko, I believe it was. Player B decides to respond with Mirror Force, and triggering Absolute Zero's effect to destroy all cards on your opponent's side of the field when it's left the field. The question is, does Starlight Road player B decides to activate Starlight Road in response to Absolute Zero's effect? The question is, does Starlight Road bring out Stardust? And the answer to that is no. If you bring out Stardust, you have to be able to destroy something, and since Absolute Zero was already destroyed while it's in the graveyard because of Mirror Force, you will not be able to special summon Stardust, but you will be able to negate the effect of Absolute Zero from destroying all your monster. So that's one. So here's another scenario where player player B activates Compulsory Evacuation Device targeting Absolute Zero. Absolute Zero then goes back to the extra deck. Does Absolute Zero effect activate to destroy all monsters on the field? So let's pretend there's no Starlight Road there. Will he be able to destroy all monsters on the field if he went back to the extra deck? The modern interpretation of this ruling is that if a monster goes back to the extra deck via Compulsory Wing Blast, Compulsory Evacuation Device, or Phoenix Wind Blast, the monster will not be able to activate in the modern interpretation of the rulings. But in Edison, returning a monster back that's face up via Compulsory Evacuation Device or Phoenix Wind Blast will still trigger the effect because it left the field. So in this case, Absolute Zero will be able to destroy all monsters on the field, even if it was lost to Compulsory Evacuation Device. So here we have a different scenario, but it's slightly different in the decision making. Absolute Zero then decides to declare an attack on a set Ryko. Ryko then destroys the Absolute Zero on the field as a result of being flipped, and then Ryko player mills the Dandelion. So what happens in this scenario? Because you are the turn player has to be chain link 1, and in this case Dandelion would then be chain link 2 as a result because they're both mandatory effects. The non-turn player has to resolve his effect have his effects be chain link 2 because of being sent to the graveyard simultaneously as Absolute Zero being destroyed, even though it wasn't really simultaneously because Ryko is sequential, not simultaneous. In this case, the Dandelions would spawn their tokens first, and Absolute Zero would then destroy all the cards on the field as a result. Yeah. Here's a different scenario where the Ryko is flipped. So in this case, Ryko is flip summoned and destroys the Absolute Zero and then mills the Dandelion. Because they are the turn player and they activated Ryko's effect, or Dandelion's effect, Dandelion's effect will have to be chain link 1 because they're turn player, and then Absolute Zero will be chain link 2. So in this case, Absolute Zero will destroy all the Rykos first, and then the tokens are being spawned. So even though the cards are the same, the turns are different, therefore the chain links are designed differently. So just be wary of that. On to the next one. So this is one where we're talking about erratas. Brionac here has the word, this is the current errata of the Brionac of the Dragon of the Ice Barrier. You may be using this in Edison tournaments, and this is actually the correct errata of Brionac, where it says you can discard any number of cards to the graveyard, then target the same number of cards your opponent control, and then it returns those cards to hand. Well, actually, in this part right here is actually not the one where that's Edison, where you can only use the effect of Brionac once per turn. Brionac actually activates effect multiple times per turn. However, under Macrocosmos, the current the Edison format Brionac is unable to use its effect to discard cards to the graveyard if its cost cannot be paid. But if you have the Hidden Arsenal version, so let's go to the Hidden Arsenal version here. So the Hidden Arsenal version does not have the such things as saying discard any number of cards to the graveyard. It's missing that text. So if you own the Hidden Arsenal text, you may be able to deceptively use this effect under Macrocosmos. However, that is illegal, and this is consistent with the documents here that it's been errated. So if you go here, this was an errata from Hidden Arsenal official. You can see the logo of the 5Ds. You can read right here. The correct text of this is that you can discard any number of cards to the graveyard. So this means under Macrocosmos, it even says that here, this clarifier is to make clear in cases you cannot discard a graveyard, you cannot activate the effect of Brionac under Macrocosmos. So just be careful of that. Brionac in Edison is unable to use the effect under Macrocosmos, just as an FYI. Okay, on to the next one. So this is going to be a soul exchange ruling, I guess. There's going to be several of them, so this is going to be basically a segment for it. So here we have a Volcanic Rocket in attack mode and a set Ryko, and the player activates Necro Valley, summoning the Descendant. And so let's say a turn has passed where nothing happened, and then Descendant decides to declare an attack on the Volcanic Rocket here, making them lose 100 attack because Necro Valley then boosts it up. The question is, on main phase 2, are you able to activate Soul Exchange to tribute off the monster for Kai's? So Soul Exchange reads in the current text, target one monster your opponent controls. This turn, if you tribute that monster, you must tribute that monster as if you controlled it. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you've activated this card. Because it has this text, you cannot conduct the battle phase in the turn you've activated this card. Since you declared an attack onto the Volcanic Rocket, you will not be able to activate Soul Exchange in main phase 2. Because you basically conducted your battle phase. Even if you decide to, you can't technically skip main phase 1 to main phase 2. You'll have to go through the battle phase to do so. So even if you try to do that, you can't activate Soul Exchange either way. So in this case, Soul Exchange will not be able to be activated in main phase 2 in where you've conducted battle. Another Soul Exchange ruling, or I guess an errata that's been happening, is that this is the current errata of the Soul Exchange. So if you go to the TCG player, which I like to do, this is what it says: target one monster your opponent. This turn, if you tribute a monster, you must tribute that monster as you control it. You cannot conduct your battle phase. So there's a lot of people who use modern cards that are errated already, and then they try to make the text work as if it is how it is working currently in Edison, but it's not true. So here it says the word, the key part of here is you want to pay attention here is you must tribute that monster. So I had a player in the last tournament activate Soul Exchange, and the other player says that you have to tribute the monster that they targeted, when that player who activated Soul Exchange didn't want to tribute it. Not sure why he didn't want to tribute, but this was an interesting one. So in the older text, if you go to edisonformat.com here, you want to use the text that was legal for April 24th to the 25th of 2010. So if you go to Soul Exchange here, that version of that is Dual Terminal 1. And so if you go on TCG Player, so that's January 29th, 2010. The next one will be in July, and that would be too late. So you want this one, the Dual Terminal 1. So if you go to Dual Terminal 1 in TCG Player, it says select an opponent's monster and use it as tribute in place of one of your own. So the key difference is between the Dual Terminal 1 and this one is that this one says you must tribute that monster. This one says you don't have to tribute it, it's just a choice. So in this case, you can choose not to tribute that monster in the event that you choose not to tribute your opponent's monster for any reason. It gives you that option. So that's just a little FYI, just in case you run into that weird situation. On to the next one. This ruling is about Battle Fader. I haven't had a chance to run into this situation until I actually understood Battle Fader more. So here we have a GB player who just declares an attack with a quarry onto a face-up Descendant. They lose 300 life points as a result, and then they attack directly with Rediari. Player B responds with Battle Fader. Battle Fader reads, if your opponent declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, then end the battle phase. So if this is the wording of this, you might intuitively think that the end of the battle phase means that, then end the battle phase means that it goes straight to main phase 2. However, that is not true. In Battle Fader, actually just takes it to the end step of the battle phase. So if you go here on the Edison format ruling here, it says here, this effect ends the battle step and moves the player into the end step of the battle phase. So it doesn't actually move to main phase 2, it moves to the end step, which means that if Gladiator Beast attacked prior to the end step of the battle phase, it will be able to tag out even after Battle Fader resolves the effect under the second GB attack that goes directly. So in this case, Gladiator Require will be able to tag out. However, Ready Area will not be able to tag out because it didn't go all the way throughout to the damage step of the battle. So in this case, only Laquari will be able to tag out even if Battle Fader uses effect to end the battle phase. Alright, on to the next one. So this ruling I actually got from Edison format quizzes, so it's actually pretty interesting in my opinion. So player A controls the DD Crow in a set Bottomless, and player B decides to pitch Malicious to special summon Grepher, and then player A decides to ask for priority, and player B says yes, priority, and then they pitch a Caius. So in this case, they can actually activate DD Crow here in order to banish the Malicious and prevent them from being able to use Malicious effect. This situation would be a lot different if player B decides to do this a little differently. So here we have player B here decides player A asking for priority, and instead of using Grepher's effect as priority, priority will be given to player B to use Malicious effect before DD Crow can be activated. So in this case, that's the way you can dodge DD Crow. If you do special summon Grepher using his effect, you do have priority activate Malicious effect prior to DD Crow using his effect in response. This makes it so that Malicious banished itself as a cost, so there's no longer a target for DD Crow. So just an FYI, if you are using Grepher, you could actually call priority to banish the Malicious prior to DD Crow resolving, but you can actually be getting tricked to call if player A actually calls for priority and you ditch a Dark Monster, it'd be too late for you to call priority to activate Malicious effect to banish. So just an FYI there. But if you don't use Grepher's effect with priority, you could fall into Bottomless, so there's that caveat. If you do decide to not use Grepher as priority, they could Bottomless your Grepher, and then you wouldn't be able to call priority to later on to use Malicious effect because DD Crow will be resolving. So just an FYI, be careful. Okay, this is going to be the last one. Here we have a Swap Frog that's face up on attack or defense position because of special summon, and then player A controls a Goyo Guardian. The question is, are you able to, and they're afraid of like a Caius for example, banishing their Goyo. So player A decides to use Swap Frog's effect to bounce Goyo Guardian. The question is, are they able to bounce Goyo Guardian with Swap Frog's effect? And the answer to that is no, you cannot. The reason why is because you're attempting to bounce a monster as a cost. So in this case right here, it says you can return one monster you control to the hand. That is a cost. Since extra deck monsters actually cannot go back to the hand as a cost, you cannot resolve the effect of Swap Frog to be able to normal summon another frog, because the cost is to be able to return a monster you control back to the hand, and since extra deck monsters do not go back to the hand, you cannot use this effect to bounce back an extra deck monster to basically dodge a Caius or whatever that you fear in the following turn. So yeah, that will be the last ruling for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the 10 ruling segment for this one, for part 3. There are other segments for those of you just tuning in who are recently subscribed. There are 2 other rulings videos that you can use as a resource to show your opponents whenever you guys decide to have a ruling, or whenever you guys have a ruling dispute. Hope you guys enjoyed, and tune in for the next rulings video happening maybe later on in the future. We'll see. See you guys later. Thanks. Bye.